All right, folks. This is going to be huge, so stick around if you'd like to. First of all, this is Frank the guitar. Um, he's out of tune, but I like to do a little intro with him, so. Anyway, yeah, cool. Anyway, Frank the guitar. He's a little Yamaha CGS 102A with a custom radius, half-sized guitar. Yes, I did that custom radius. This is In the Image Clothing Company podcast where we have discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ. This episode here, as I said before I even did the little intro thing with Frank the guitar, this is going to be huge. We discuss things that don't change here at In the Image Clothing Company. We are all sinful by nature, myself just as much as everybody else. And so I don't relay information perfectly. Nothing that I ever say will be or could be because I'm an imperfect human being. That's why we have our perfect God to rely on. But what I do discuss within this will be eternal. And well, as we try to have everything that we say within In the Image Clothing Company be, there's no point to have opinions. I always say, don't believe me. You don't need to believe whatever I say within this. As much as I say this is going to be hard-hitting and just will last forever, and it will, and it is the truth. Again, not that I'm going to say every single word and approach every single description of everything so perfect, but, what I'm saying within this really just is how it is. But don't believe me, just, this is one of those really, really, really big, hard-hitting things where you can see how much of a misled society we live in modern 2025. Today's oh no, not the 11th. Today's the 13th of February, 2025. It's a Wednesday. Yes. So, cool. Anyway, I know how hard this is going to hit people. I know how, like, dedicated there are of people out there to what I am going to discuss here and what I'm going to say. People are probably just going to come into it with preconceived ideas of, hey, you're wrong, thinking about like what I'm saying. And you can believe that. You can believe whatever you want, but the truth is the truth. I'm going to talk about some things that are going to be really, really great for people to hear and quite a relief as well. And so we'll get into this. I'm not even going to tell you what the title of this is quite yet, but this is episode 59 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. I'll tell you the title after I do the little intro as I do. Discussing In the Image Clothing Company, what we are, and the three sides to our company. And we'll get into this. I'll do a little bit of preface of what the title is too as well before I really get into the discussion of this, because I want this to be pretty thorough, but I do also want to say before I get into any further with this, I could get so deep with discussing this topic, with what the word of this title of this episode is. Well, I guess if you clicked on this, you probably already know what it is. I don't know why I feel like I'm going to not quite see the title though for a minute or two here. I could talk about this topic for it doesn't matter the length of time, but I could talk so deeply about this. Physically, I could get into so much of the anatomy of the human body and the things that go into why this is happening, clothing, positions of people's bodies and, for excess amount of time that should never happen anyway, that they're doing certain things like modern jobs and occupations and habits and the technological age that we've come into within the past decades. All these things, I could get so deep, and I could talk about this topic in such depth. And I'm going to get pretty deep within this episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. But I want to say before I even say anything that I do say about this, even at my current understanding, at today's date, I could just talk about this to an insane amount of depth. So I don't want people to think that I have an opinion or that I don't like this activity of what the title of this is, and so I have an opinion that I'm trying to like say it's wrong or say that just because I don't want to do it, it's this, or I have some opinion on it. I don't, and I don't care to. I like to look at things as they are, and again, that's why I wanted to make it so clear at the very start that this is an eternal thing. This will always be the way that it is. Our human bodies are just what they are, and they always will be. We are all universally designed in the image as it says in our name, in the Image Clothing Company of our living God, Jesus Christ. So we will always be how we are, what we are. Physically, we will operate the only way that we do. We didn't design our bodies. And the amount of injuries that are coming from this in the physical sense of what this title of this episode here is, in the Image Clothing Company podcast, episode 59. The amount of injuries are something people get blinded by because they think that it's just common to have an injury, but no, what you're doing is something that your body really doesn't do in the ways that we're approaching it, and it's just become such a thing. We get blinded by cultures, blinded by like booms of things, blinded by fads, if you will, things that come and go that are so popular for just a time, a decade, 2 decades, a whole century, just like 4 months, whatever it is, right? And we think it's so normal, and then we stop doing it as a society for a while, and then we look at it and we're like, oh, that was weird. We all thought this was like such a great thing to do in the time, and now nobody does it, and now we can actually see what it was. So that's what this topic is like. So with all that being said, we are in the Image Clothing Company. This is in the Image Clothing Company podcast. As I discussed, we have discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ within this podcast, which is the truth of all things. Don't believe me. I can't say that too much. I could always just continue to say that in anything I ever discuss as a human being, because we're all equals. We're all just sinning. We're all messing up. We're all just trying to make an understanding of what this place that we have been given, this earth and this earthly existence, this world that we have as human beings. We create things, and even like the topic of and the title of this episode, it's the thing we've created to be something that's so not even real. And I'll get into that again, not my opinion, but we'll get into it. So yeah, we're just here, and we have discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ, but you don't have to believe me on anything I ever say, just like I don't have to believe any other human being, whether they're an elder to me. Maybe they have some more experience in something, some more wisdom that I can take things from, and always take people into consideration, because we're humans, we're equals. I mean, we got to be kind to each other, but we don't have to believe anything that anybody says. We're just people. We believe only one. We have one shepherd, Jesus the Christ. We're all just lost sheep. And if you don't understand some of that like terminology, check out In the Image Clothing Company deeper. We have discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's what I'm saying, the truth of all things. And we discuss the Bible, the Book of Mormon. If you have any kind of preconceived ideas or beliefs about what those things are as well, what you've heard from other people or whatever, don't. That's what I'm saying. Don't believe people. Don't believe me. I've said that a few times already. Please don't. I just know that people are going to take this, my discussion of what I'm going to talk about, in so many different ways, and people get so heated over things that they believe. But truth is truth. Things are just what they are. So I'm going to discuss this topic as it is, not because I think that I have some way of seeing it or a way we should approach it, or get on board with me. Please don't. That's not what I'm doing. But as in the Image Clothing Company, our whole goal is allowing, keyword, the body to work. So we allow the body to work. We talk about sleeping, eating, walking, standing, and doing all these things naturally. And we know how to do it here. And don't believe us, right? But it's the truth. The truth manifests itself to you. So the thing is, clothing is the only thing that's physically placed on our human flesh. So it alters the body. The body has a center line. There's no belief, no opinion, no yoga class, like I say. I mean, there's a spine, there's the sternum in the front of the body, there's the nose. There is a center, and there has to be. Otherwise, the body is just being so overworked to even just try to operate at all. And then you try to do anything else on top of just like breathing and pumping blood and being a human being, then you're going to just be forcing your body to just do things that it can't at all because of an external source, clothing. So again, no opinion. You don't have to like care about clothing extra specially or like have it be something you're into, but you're a human being and you're only just a fleshly mechanical machine. And clothing is going to alter your body if it's not with every intention of yours being placed onto you in ways that your body works. Because it only works the way that it works. Every joint within the body only connects to the next one the way that it does. Every system within the body only functions the way that it does We here focus on the skeletal system because the body's not about the fat content that comes and goes. And it's not about the muscle mass that comes and goes. It's about the only thing that actually stays, just like within the gospel of Jesus Christ, our foundation is on Christ himself. Jesus the Christ, our living God. Within the human body, anything that can come and go doesn't really dictate what the body is, but the skeletal system will always just be what it is, right? I mean, it grows to a certain degree between somewhere in like teenage years, 10 to 20 years old as a human being, give or take, and then it's full grown, and it's just what it is for the rest of our existence. It doesn't change as a human being, the skeletal system. So we need to see the body as it is. We need to see this topic as it is. We need to keep all opinions aside when we're trying to discuss what we know as truth. Truth is just what it is. It's apart from all of us. I don't get to decide it. He doesn't get to decide it. She doesn't get to decide it. And we don't get to change it. And it never does change. Our God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So, In the Image Clothing Company has three sides. The podcast here, which I discussed what that is. We also have what I call the main company side of In the Image Clothing Company. Just, that. Where we discuss the anatomy of the human body. We discuss clothing, what it's doing to the body, and we show modifications to clothing that you purchase, or I purchased, that I personally do, to just allow, always keyword, allow the body to work. We can't get it to do anything. We didn't design it. It only does what it does. You're not going to get the hand to do a function besides what the hand does, or the feet, or the hips, or the knees, or the ankles, or any part of the body, right? The elbows, the wrists, the neck, the jaw. It just only does what it does. The spine, all the parts of the body that have, like joints and mobility and motion. Everything has a neutral, and it only works out of its neutral. We can come from the neutral, like the neutral wrist, for example, straight out from that forearm to the pinky is the neutral wrist. You can use the wrist in a position with it this way or the other way, but it always has to come back home, if you will, back to its neutral position. So that goes with everything. The jaw, the spine, the pelvis is naturally posteriorly tucked position, right? If you need that spine to stay pretty well vertical when we stand, because that's how the body's just going to use the least amount of energy, posture is a myth as far as looking at it as something as trying to get your body to do something, trying to stand up straight. It's not going to happen. You're fighting something if you feel like you're trying to push yourself straighter. The body will just work most efficiently if it's standing as vertical as it can while still having the nice slight curvature and everything to just keep the muscles always constantly activated. Posture's a joke. And we'll talk about that more as we do. I've talked about it a lot up until this point, mostly on the main side of In the Image Clothing Company. But the other third of our company is In the Image Clothing Company Music, where I show setups of mostly guitars, but then whatever else we get into as far as instruments go, to just allow it to mesh with the only way the human body works. We do what we do with music. I mean, just, keeping the body in a good position to sing or to play any instruments. And I also make music there as well. So, yeah, all that we do get into with music, that's what we do over there. So, I'm going to discuss this really quick. Again, I want to make it so very clear. It's like what I said with the fact. I'm going to sit on that for a second. It's an absolute fact. It's the truth. There's no opinion, no belief, no yoga class. I already stated that, but it's just the truth. And I want to hit that so hard because that's something that you're going to be able to kind of get a little bit of context as we go further into me discussing things that people probably think that I have an opinion on. It's just the truth. The body has no opinion to have on it having a center line. It has to. Gravity pulls us straight down. There's two sides to us. You can have amputations, you can have deformities, you can have, whatever with your body that's unique, but still we have to do all that we can to keep the body centered because it has a center. It has two nostrils, it has two lungs, it has two arms, two legs. The spine just is in the center. The brain feeds this, like from the brain to the brain stem through the spine. It feeds the entire body with a nervous system, an electrical system that tells the body what it's doing. It gives it the sense of touch. And the body just has a center. There's no opinion, no possible opinion to have. We didn't design the body, but we didn't design the earth that has gravity that pulls us from our center. So with that, pants need to be entirely above our hips. So when I'm saying this episode is quite a bit differently structured than most all the other ones because this is a huge topic. Like I said, I mean, I could just get so deep nuanced little tiny things with all this stuff, such deep discussion and explanation of these things, anatomy of the body, reasons as to why this is the approach nowadays. And I just want to make it so clear, there's no opinion, but people are so blinded. And I also want to make it clear, I'm not talking down on anybody. There's so many things. I say, most all the things that I discuss within In the Image Clothing Company that we're doing to damage our bodies, I was doing. And that's what actually was the thing that made it possible for me to be the one to found this company and to understand these universal eternal truths the way that I do, because I was making these mistakes myself. And in ways I still do, in ways I still always could to any degree. So I'm not condemning or talking down on others, because I'm going to get pretty bold with this. I'm going to make fun of it in all seriousness. I don't need to cover myself or try to sugarcoat things. I mean, if it sounds so insultive or whatever, I'm not talking about people, but the activity of what this is. And the I always mention when I talk about behaviors, right? Like sins or habits or anything, it's the behavior that's so if I'm using the word disgusting or whatever, it's not the person. I mean, you can have an amazing person that gets into terrible habits. I've had terrible habits that I've done in my life, and that I'll continue to do, no matter how righteous I get or whatever. So I know that I sound so mean sometimes if you're hearing it incorrectly, but I'm not talking about people. I'm not directing at somebody, but what they're doing, yes. I mean, because it could be me. I could be talking about my own self doing behaviors or activities that are just so whatever the word is I put on it, however much passion I have behind whatever I say. So again, more context, just because I know this is going to be so hard-hitting, and it needs to be, because it's just the truth. So yes, pants need to be entirely above our hips, right? I always talk about where clothing needs to sit, and in the Image Clothing Company's 2 prerequisites. So this is no different, but then we're going to get into a lot of greatness within this. So, forewarning, if it cuts off, it's not me I accidentally said too much and I was too bold and I cut it off because I didn't want to sound a certain way. No, the device that I'm using to film these episodes of In the Image Clothing Company currently in this time period and some of the past episodes gets full of storage space, and it cuts me off. Occasionally it's happened in past episodes. So forewarning, but I think that I have enough space to say what I'm going to say. That's a big reason why I said I could just get so deep into this, because I'm not going to say everything that I could possibly think of right now in this episode, but we're going to talk pretty deep about it. But anyway, the hips, they just have ranges of motion, and they have to. Otherwise, they're being restricted. So the pants need to be all the way up entirely off of those hips. If you are ever doing anything with your pants on your hips, on your pelvis, as a whole unit that's functioning, it has rotations, and the femurs come up into the pelvis on both legs. The spine connects into the pelvis, and then you've got so many muscles. You've got your glutes that come in and through and around your pelvis, your hamstrings, your hip flexors, your adductors, your abductors, the muscles of the low back. You've got the quadratus lumborum. You've got the lat, which are these huge muscles, the latissimus dorsi. They come from the shoulder, the upper arm, all the way down your back and connect to the lower part of your spine and the whole crest of that upper part of the pelvis. Those are huge muscles. The hamstrings are quite large as well, and they, I mentioned them, they connect into the hips. So I mean, all your abdominal muscles, the whole idea of what it means to activate your core, which is something that should never be deactivated. The body only works as a whole, and it always works only activated. If any part of the body isn't, something else and many things are having to compensate to try to just allow this machine to work. Because if any part of a machine isn't working, the whole gets altered. It's not just that one thing that just doesn't quite do something well. It's, it's like the phrase, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. If your core is deactivated, your whole entire body is just in physical disarray. So again, as much passion as I have behind any of this, I'm not mad, but I'm going to get probably pretty passionate with just how insane this is. No opinion of mine. So yes. Okay. Anyway, all the muscles. I mean, we could talk about any and every muscle that goes into the pelvis. But if you are doing anything and your pants are on your hips, the waistline of your pants, you are just damaging your entire body. Damaging. That's it. I mean, that's what is happening. Myself in the past. But so all the way up above the hips, entirely with the waistband, and then the angle. Oh my heavens. The angle of our waistband has to be higher in the front, and very slightly is all that it needs to be, but it does have to be higher. Otherwise, you just have something around the circumference of your waist. And if it's falling in the front, and the core muscles, the muscles below the front of your rib cage that are above your hips, right? Those abdominals, the abs, the whatever you want to call them. You've got obliques within there. You've got, like, people think about like a 6-pack or an 8-pack. To get those muscles activated, they have to get shorter. They have to contract. And that's the only way a muscle works, is if it shortens to turn on, to activate. But it has to always just be working, again, or else something is compensating. You're having tight hamstrings, you're having tight and unworking glutes and calves, and your quads are taking over if your core isn't doing its only natural function, which is being constantly and always activated, as if there was nothing altering it. So the point with going into such depth with that description within this episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast is because if that waistband falls at all farther down in the front than in the rear, you are pulling, elongating, physically stretching your core muscles by a waistband around the circumference of your body. And you will never activate those muscles if there's something physically pulling them down, lengthening them when they have to contract. When you think about doing a sit-up, all you're doing is shortening those muscles. But then you stop doing those sit-ups and stand up, and immediately your pants are falling down in the front. Just so common for that to be happening. You are just, everything you just did within that sit-up is entirely void. It's just gone. Every ounce of anything. You will hear me with this amount of passion when I talk about workouts. That's just how it is, because it's the truth. No opinion of mine. So, again, I didn't know in the past. I'm not condemning others, but it's just I'm trying to help, and I'm not even trying. If you listen to what I'm saying, don't believe me, but just take the truth within this, then this will change your life. That's why we have In the Image Clothing Company, speaking universal truths for eternity, unchanging just as they are. So, yes, slightly higher in the front than the rear for the waistband, entirely above the hips. Prerequisite, we always say that, but that's going to be massive for what I'm talking about. I could not ever hit that enough. Or, well, I can hit it enough, because if you hear it, then that's enough, but I could never hit it too much, is what I mean. Okay, so the tops that we wear, shirts or jackets, coats, anything that goes on your torso and on your shoulders. The seams that are on top of our shoulders need to sit evenly behind these little bones that are up on the top of the shoulders, toward the end of the shoulders. Those little bones, you can follow them down and they come to like your throat right here, where the top of your rib cage meets at this top of the sternum, because that's the other end of our collarbones. When there's that little bump on the top of the shoulders. I'm getting in depth with the description in this episode. This is going to be amazing. So for the sake of changing lives, not because you got to believe me or not because I'm so cool. No, it's just the truth. Period and done. Eternal truth. So I couldn't hit it enough. Yes, these seams need to be evenly behind these little bones, okay? And at the edge seams of our shoulders, the ones that are like on the edges, right? Sometimes you've got a shirt that's too large for you. The edge seams will fall down your arms. Those edge seams need to be right at the edges. You think about moving your shoulder. It's just, the body's just a mechanical machine. If that seam falls any lower than where the shoulder is going to pivot and hinge, as if you're just lifting your arm to your side, you're altering it, and greatly. So there we go, right? The shoulders naturally sit behind the body. You have these bones, these scapulas that sit behind the rib cage. You've got your mid traps, upper traps, lower traps, and all those muscles pull your shoulders together behind you. You have your rotator cuff muscles that go in like kind of in different ways. Some go between the scapula and the rib cage. Some come to the outside of it. Some come from like the shoulder joint and come in. There's muscles within there called a rotator cuff. I think there's 4. It doesn't matter if I'm so correct about the amount, and I don't need to know all the names, but it just is what it is. Those muscles all work to pull your shoulders behind you. Some of them have functions to do other things, but the shoulders sit behind the body, behind the head, behind your ears. They sit behind you. Otherwise, your whole body is altered. As I said, if any part of the body is altered in any way, if there's anything we can do about it, well, either way, it's going to cause something else and many things within the body to have to compensate. So, yes, okay. There we go. That's where clothing has to sit, okay? For every human being. It doesn't matter if you're a man, a woman, tall, short, skinny, fat. You could be 100 pounds, 9,000 pounds, right? I mean, just want to make it absurd. So it's just as obvious as it is once we can see it. You can live in this time period or 5,000 years prior, 5,000 years in the future, and any end of everything. The human body does not change, nor will it ever. We did not evolve physically like that. I mean, we can get, I don't even want to get into all this. Honestly, this is hard for me to say just because I know how people are going to react to it. And I don't care, other than you're just denying the truth if you're trying to think that I have an opinion on these things. And so please don't. I mean, please just hear it as it is. That's why I say don't believe me. It's not about me at all. I'm just trying to help out of truth. And we do. My life has been changed, and anybody and everybody who takes the truth from this, not Evan Strong's words as the founder of the Image Clothing Company, because I said them, but just the truth from all this, okay? Please, for your sake. That's what we're doing here. So, in addition to just where clothing sits, the human body has just its only functions. I'm going to say this before I go on. The pants that we wear, if you put a drawstring around your waist, again, I'm not making fun of people for not knowing. I didn't know. I did this for 24 years or however long. But just when I was 24, I learned how obvious this is, which is strange to even be able to say. If you take a rope and put it around your waist, okay, a drawstring, and you tie it one side over the other like this, just like a knot, right? Either way, you're just twisting your entire pelvis forward and tilted, okay? You take that right side and tie it over the left, and you're taking your entire pelvis and putting it forward and to the right. You take the left side and tie it over the right, and you're going to take your entire pelvis and put it forward and to the right, okay? I mean, that's just how it's going to happen. You're just taking a rope and crossing one side over the other and twisting your pelvis, which then twists your entire body from there up and from there down. The rotations in your feet change, the arches in your feet that should always be, as the core is as well, constantly activated. The body only works as a whole activated. Golly. So, but it changes the rotations in your hands all the way to your fingertips, your spine, and everything. If you tie a rope uneven around your center of your body from top to bottom vertically, where you're going to hinge at the hips. So the slipped lap knot, LAPP, is what I use for drawstrings. It's beautiful because it slips. It's a slip knot of a kind. It's one of a slip knot type of knots. And it just keeps the waistline extremely horizontal. I mean, it just pulls perfectly, and there's nothing perfect besides our God, but it pulls horizontal, so the hips can then stay centered and even. We have an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Staying Centered, and it's just so silly that we don't see it, but again, I didn't. If we put something on our body and it's imbalanced, our body will never be able to be balanced. So, yes, again, I'm not being mean when I sound so, like, accusations. It's just, I gotta hit this so hard, because it's just truth, and it always will be what it is. So, when you do tie a slipped lap knot, make sure you tie it to where the side that doesn't have like the loopy part, I mean, you can look up how to do it, but the side that's just like one singular loop, make sure you loop that in toward the center of your body rather than making that loop facing outward, because that will just actually cause like an area where your core can like expand out rather than it pulling your core in tightly, like having nice even pressure. So you'll take that side with just the singular loop and loop it toward yourself, toward the center, because that way that part of it will be like in the middle of the knot pressing against your body, right? Rather than the other way. So that's enough explanation for you to be able to know what I'm saying. Just everything within everything of the body goes to the center of it. We cannot do anything away from our own selves. I mentioned at the spine, right? I mean, that's where everything stems from. It has to be that we focus on the center of our body. So with that being said, that's covered clothing and in depth. I don't discuss it that much within the intros, but this is different. So yes, pants and tops, there we go. That's how they need to be. Not my opinion, just how the body's skeletal system works. That's going to keep the pelvis in a neutral position with the waistband sitting where it does, slightly higher in the front than the rear, entirely up above the hips, so they're not being restricted, okay? Because the natural waist, like if you're going to sit down like I am now and bend over, you don't bend where your hip bones are. You bend right above your hip bones. Your hip bones can stay entirely in the exact same location, and you can bend because it's your spine that's allowing you to bend, and the muscles that connect into it and to your hips are the ones that are allowing you to move. And your spine's just like the central, support that's moving. So you don't bend where your hips are, you bend above them. And so you put your pants where you're going to bend your body. I'm not being accusations. I know that I sound so mean, but if you know who I am, then you understand. But just don't leave, because I want you to have this information. You don't gotta stay here for me, but please stay for you, please. I'm helping, and there's no opinion to it. So, now let's yeah. So anyway, the pelvis then will have its neutral position. Okay, with the pants in that location. Now, but the tops, again, the shoulders have to be in their neutral position. Everything only works out of its neutral position, except if it moves from its neutral to do something, it can. But it always has to come back to its neutral, otherwise it's going to just get bound up. Scar tissue will be creating to be trying to stabilize things, and muscles will adhere to the bones, trying to stabilize when they're not in their only working neutral position. And that's every joint within the entire body. So we just need to know where our neutral spots are of every joint. And the only way we have to do that is by allowing the body to work. There's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Designed to Work. And I went over how the body is just designed to do functions and well, but only in the way that it does. And we can't alter that at all, or else it will not work. So keeping the shoulders in their neutral position will only be allowed to happen if those seams on top are slightly just right behind those little bones that are up there and right at the very edges for the edge seams. I know that I said it, but I want to reiterate it just because that is the only way it will happen. That's it. That's it. So, exceptions if clothing designs have different things, right, or whatever. Button-up shirts, I talked about, they have a band of material that just goes across the rear of the shoulders rather than a singular seam. Like, there's certain things, but the whole point is the focus of where the seam's sitting has to be behind the shoulders, because the shoulders will naturally just be behind the body to open and expand your rib cage. Those scapulas need to be where they're going to be to allow that to happen, to be able to elevate your body enough to expand your rib cage in a vertical sense. Your shoulders can't be being pulled down by oversized clothing. Your body will be in such turmoil physically. So we get into these chronic patternings, right? These universal patternings that apply to every human across the globe and always will. And it's because of clothing. There's no opinion, no dispute. We're here to help, please. Just hear truth. So shoes and tags, two prerequisites that In the Image Clothing Company has just to further aid in no restriction to the human body. That's all that we're doing. We're not doing anything to the feet with our shoelacing technique, the one that we use. We don't own a technique of shoelacing. It's just a weave of a rope over the top of your feet. But check out In the Image Clothing Company anywhere you find us and everywhere you find us on the internet in 2025 or going forward, but just meaning we do have that nowadays, the internet. You can find the technique that we use, but not only that, I'm going to stand up. If you are watching this episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast in visual as well as audio, then you can see this. If not, you can find it wherever. I'm going to stand up and just show. Shout out to Zero Shoes, XERO. No affiliation as of today's date, nor have I ever up until today's date, but I will always just continue to shout out Zero Shoes as I do. They are amazing. They have helped me physically so much. They have helped found this company, even though they haven't been involved, but just me being able to purchase their shoes to use. But these are the Denver leather Zero shoes, just because I'm going to show them. So, there you go. Credit to them entirely for making these boots. I'm going to show my boots so you can see our shoelacing technique, but how to actually do it, we have tutorials wherever we do. We have so many videos on the main side of In the Image Clothing Company where I discuss what the shoelacing technique allows to happen, because again, it doesn't do anything to the feet. But with this technique, we tie our shoes evenly, two sides of the body where the spine is in the center, right? 2 feet. So you tie one side, the right, over toward the inside, and then you tie the left over toward the inside. Okay, everything comes to the center. Otherwise, your entire body from your feet up is being pulled into a twist. And really, it's only on the one side, because if we're trying to get it to the center, but you're tying both feet to the same direction, the one you're tying away from your center, that entire side of your body is just being pulled into external rotation because of a physical rope knot around your foot and ankle. And that travels through the entirety of your body, doing things that people couldn't imagine until you understand. So I'm going to stand up and show these laces, and then I'll sit back down and continue. Here we go. Look at this. There's the right. There's the left. Okay, just the exact opposite on each side of the body as is the shoe tying, right? Just so that we allow it to be even. That's it. Okay, it just shapes your shoe as your human foot is shaped. Now, secondly, we remove all tags. Anywhere there's a tag in clothing, where it is, the muscles are not able to activate against that tag, okay? In addition, if they're causing a gap physically, it's just changing the body. It's changing the way the skeletal system sits against itself, and the joints go into each other, and they only do that in the way that they do. We will never get the human body to do anything it doesn't do. It only does what it does. This is so obvious when we see it, but tags in clothing anywhere. I'm not even going to label exactly where they are. Just anywhere inside of clothing, even within shoes. Even if the tags within the shoes aren't causing a physical gap, again, that slip, the slipperiness. Because tags are so commonly, at least at this time period, placed in the tongues of shoes, where you have so many muscles and tendons and things going down into your feet from your shins, like from your lower legs. Oh my gosh. The ankle has to be open and neutral and loosely activated, if that makes sense. Always constantly activated, the body as a whole. But the ankle has to be able to just be what it is. And it cannot activate against that slippery material that is being currently used within the tongue tabs of shoes. And so people have collapsed arches within their feet just because of the tags within their tongue of their shoe. But then if they have shoelacing techniques that are collapsing the arches of their feet, and not only just, yeah, I mean, it gets so deep. But like I said, I'm not going to go so crazy deep with explaining all the stuff within this, but everything that I'm saying, it's not just like if you want to live in a perfect world, it's like no matter what, if these things are happening to you, your body's being damaged. So every human to live forever. No opinion. So yes, those are our two prerequisites. Shoelacing, tying them evenly over toward the inside. It's massively huge. Your foot is only shaped the way that it is. And it's the foundation of your entire body. And so it has to be even, meaning the arches have to just have their room to work, but not excess room to where they're trying to find the top of the shoe. And also, yes, just tie it evenly. Otherwise, you're having a rotation issue through your entire body. Oh my gosh. This is stuff I didn't know. I didn't have like a wink of knowledge of any of this stuff before I did. And so you can't be held accountable for what you don't know. And so it's just absurd that this can even happen. The amount of damage that we do to our own bodies. It's crazy. Now that I've said all that, the title of this episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, episode 59, is titled Running. Running is a joke. It's like how I say posture is a joke. You can sit there with tags in the rear of your shirt and putting your body into this position where it's constantly trying to work around that, and you're in a constant chronic state of this pattern of your body's spine avoiding this tag, and all the muscles that are up there, all the muscles of all the things that happen. I mean, again, I could get into it, but the upper traps are huge. People don't have overactive traps. They have traps that aren't allowed to work, so they're in protective tension. That's a term. You don't have to use a term. The point is, there's a tag there, and your traps just want to work, and they can't activate against a slippery tag. Also, it's just a gap, and so they're just stiff, and they have scar tissue. They just don't have their natural workings anywhere near, just because they're being physically altered by something that's always pressed against them. That's all it is. So there's no such thing as posture. There's just the only way the body works. But people are trying to stand up and push against a tag, but then once they stop like trying to force themselves straight up, their body's just going to go back to the position that the tag's placing them into. this imbalance. I mean, it's just that obvious, but we don't know. I didn't know. I'm not condemning, man. I did not know. But it's so obvious. It's crazy that we can't see this. So, yes, remove tags from everything. That's crazy. So that's just as obvious as it can get. But again, I didn't know. I mean, it's the paradoxical gospel of Jesus Christ. It's so obvious, but it's like, well, how could I have even known? Well, I don't know. And how can that both be the same thing and both be true? I don't know, but it is. So, gosh. Okay. Anything with the feet that is elevating them, your feet only work on the ground. Imagine you didn't wear any clothing out of like the idea of being modest still, but just seeing how the body would work. If it had never been restricted by something physically placed onto it, or being placed into shoes or like socks, for example, how would the body work? And that's the only way that it does. It's like taking any kind of animal and trying to place it into clothing of any kind, and it's trying to do all that it can to like squirm out of it, because it's altering its body's only workings in every way that it does that, which is many. So the human body is no different in that sense. It's just a mechanical machine. So in the ways that it's just doing mechanical operations is what I mean. And running is a physical, just mechanical operation. I mean, it's just so obvious when we see it. Again, I didn't, but it's crazy. So the feet have to be entirely on the ground, as if we're on the ground. I mean, you go do all the runs you want in shoes and then come home and take your shoes off. You've only trained your body to work around the shoe. Whatever that has done to your foot that has altered it in any way, you have trained your body to work with that thing on it only. And that's something that it doesn't nor would ever actually be able to do, and you're forcing it to. So barefoot shoes, right? Zero shoes. No affiliation as of today's date or up until today's date, but maybe one day. If not, then cool. I'll shout them out till the day that I die if I never get a dime from them or any kind of advertisement from them or anything. They have done so much for me, just making a product that I have been able to purchase because of how just natural it allows my feet to be, and anybody's who purchases them, but use the technique that we use, not because it's ours, we don't get anything from that, because it's the only way that it's going to shape the shoe as your foot is shaped. The only way. The human foot with 20 plus muscles, not muscles, bones, it's got 27 bones in it, as far as I'm aware, each foot, or 26, I don't know, the hands are 27 and the feet are 26, or the other way around. I don't know for sure, I haven't actually clarified that as I've been saying that, but all the bones in there only connect the way that they do. The foot is just a shape. It's just an operation. It's like the hand. I mean, you put your hand in a mitten, right? I say this, I have a video for In the Image Clothing Company, the main side, under the Truth Behind series titled The Truth Behind the Feet. And I talk about, and in many other ways I've discussed this in videos as well, you take your hand and you put it into a mitten, if you know what that is, something that takes all four of the fingers and keeps them together in one area, and then the thumb can still do its own thing, and the hand will not operate correct. I mean, you try to do everything with all of your fingers entirely, like, put together as one, for example, as it would be in a mitten versus a glove with an individual space for each finger, then your hand will not operate the only way that it does. And so think about shoes that way, okay? It just has to be shaped exactly how the foot would naturally work, or else it's not going to be able to work, period. And pain throughout the entire body, to the top of the head, to the tips of the fingers, because of your shoes. That's just as obvious as it is, again, once we see it. So the feet have to be entirely flat. Zero drop is a term that they use to describe shoes that don't have any elevation from heel to toe. We have to have zero elevation from heel to toe. Whether you have no shoes on at all, whether you have boots on, whether you have shoes that are branded as this or that or what. Any type of material, ideally no stretch in any clothing. The body can't predict stretch. The body will just be using so much excess stabilizing muscle within any stretch, in anything. Drawstrings, pants, undergarments, socks, shoe material, shoe laces, shirts, tops of any type. Something you put on your head, even a hat with stretch. Anything that is stretchy, the body will be so damaged by. So Think about running attire and how they sell it with this built-in stretch. Your body's being damaged just sitting against anything. Me sitting against this wall with stretch within my shirt. If I did have it, I don't. Gosh darn it, this is insane. Your rib cage will not be able to expand. The muscles will be like tightening up in ways to try to stabilize against something that isn't stable. And that's just how the body works. We talk about that with sleeping all the time. You know, anything ever though. You place your body within anything with any stretch, period, it will be altering your body to quite an insane degree. No opinion of mine, it will never change. That's one of those absolute eternal truths. So, okay, where was I? The feet have to be flat on the floor, okay? I mean, we can walk over things that are uneven because nature's always uneven. I talk about all the time how we live in a modern man-made existence. And anything that's man-made that is flat in a way that it would never be in nature, then it's just something the body can't actually really work normally, meaning just the only way that it does with, okay? So you'd be walking outside, even if you're walking on grass, it's uneven. You're walking on gravel, it's uneven. You're walking on dirt that has not been like entirely perfectly smoothed out and tamped down by a human being or a machine. Dirt's just uneven naturally. So the body just likes texture, likes unevenness, actually. That's what keeps the muscles working. That's what allows the joints to stay mobile and fluid and in their ranges of motion. And that's what allows the body to stay activated as a whole, is everything is stabilizing constantly just to keep the body working, keep it breathing. Every single part of the body to some degree is working when we breathe, whether it's stabilizing or whether it's physically expanding the rib cage or the lungs themselves, whether it's moving those scapulas, those bones I talked about in the upper back, out of the way to get the rib cage to have room to expand, whether it's elevating the collarbones to do a similar thing, or muscles within the neck to get breath through the trachea, muscles within even the face or the nose. I mean, the whole entire body, all the way down to the tips of your toes, because the feet stabilize. Even sitting down when my feet aren't on the ground right now, my feet are still activated, stabilizing my body, keeping my core, and it doesn't even matter to talk about a specific part of the body as a whole activated. That's the only way that it actually works. That's the way it would always naturally work, unless altered. It always has to work, every part of it, just to breathe. And so there we go. I mean, breathing alone. If you're running and anything is doing anything at all to alter your breathing, then you're altering your breathing. But the feet just would work flat on the ground. Not that the ground has to be flat, but as far as nothing elevating the toes or the heels. And nothing artificially stuck in the center of your foot, what they label as arch support. You support an arch from the bottom and you actually collapse it. An arch is one of the most sturdy structures that you could possibly make. Maybe even the most, I don't know as of current, but very, very sturdy. But what makes an arch sturdy is the weight on top of it. You bring something from the bottom of the arch and it will collapse. That's just how the structure of physics of an arch works. There's no opinion of mine. Arch support is an absolute myth. If you have arch support within your shoes, if you have arch support, quote unquote, within your socks, as far as like a band around the center of them that is squishing your arch, that is entirely weakening your whole body and your natural arches that are there in every human, unless you have like a very specific condition. But again, not that's been labeled that because you're in a patterning from something that you've done for X amount of forever. If you had never had any kind of restriction to your body, you just had like deformed feet, that's the only way that there would ever be any problem with arches. And take that with a grain of salt, but hear that correct is what I mean. But there has to be arches within the feet, and that happens by them gripping from the bottom and having a void of space where that arch is, like an airway, if you will. Like you could stick something underneath the arch so that those tendons under there can squeeze together and the muscles can squeeze together. That's what's creating an arch. You stick something underneath there to quote unquote support it. You're pressing into those muscles and now they're deactivated and your arch collapses and your feet point out instead of straight forward, the direction you are going. When you're running, which we shouldn't do except for very specific cases. I'm going to get into more depth. Okay, again, no opinion of mine. That's it, and that's how it is. We can't be squishing our toes inward, right? Too narrow of toe boxes within shoes that just are too narrow for the feet. Again, if your feet had never been inside of something man-made and you had just been walking as a human would on the earth, how are they going to work? That's the only way that they actually do. No opinion of mine. I didn't design them. I can't tell you that they got to work a way that Evan Strong, me, wants them to. But just how's the body working is something we did not design. We cannot decide how it works. So we need to understand how it does. That's what we do here within In the Image Clothing Company. Okay, we get to the truth of it. Period and done. All opinions aside, except for, we mess up, but right. We do speak truth. So there we go. That's it. That's quite a few things within clothing. Anything within your pockets. You go on a run with anything in your pockets. Excess weight, something pressing against, if it's in the front of your pockets, is pressing against your quads, causing them to have more sensory activation than your glutes. Also pulling down the front of your pants, deactivating your core because of the angle of the waistband that it is now in because of the weight in the front. Okay, things in the rear of the pockets, just going to alter the body the way that it does. I mean, you're just taking your pelvis, which is the center of your entire body, and tweaking it in ways that are just both, forward and back and in a rotation. The pelvis has a lot of natural movement within it, and you place something against it that is causing a just unnatural thing to happen, and you have altered your entire body, again, to the tips of your toes, to the tips of your fingers, to the top of your head, because your pelvis is the center of all of that. So nothing can be in pockets. Nothing can be on the body anywhere. People will strap things to their arms. People will strap things around their waist and go on a run, and your entire body is being damaged because it's being pulled on by weight. It's being restricted from muscles activating because you have something constricting them, like a snake, like a boa constrictor. That's a type of snake. It's going to go around you and suffocate you. That's what you're doing in those instances to your muscles activation. And your body only works as a whole. So anywhere that thing's placed, it's not only about what it's doing to that, but like I say, not because I say, but it's the truth. Something else and many things within the body have to compensate if there's something inhibited in any way. Again, 2 degrees, and in ways there's certain times when there's nothing we can do, or there's things we can do, but only to a certain degree, right? I mean, if you do have an amputation or like there's times and places, but it's still the case. The body still only works as a whole, regardless of what is causing anything to be inhibited. So yes, that's just how it is. No opinion of mine. So let's continue to talk about clothing for just a second, and then we'll just get into how silly running really is. Socks, put socks on, and there's that natural curvature of the lower leg, like from, well, the leg as a whole really, but if you picture the lower leg and the bones of the lower leg naturally outwardly bow, and as it comes down, that outward bow continues through the ankle. That's what gives you that neutral ankle all the way down to the heel. There's that outward curvature to the legs, all the way from, basically the hips, but if we're just thinking about the lower leg bones continuing all the way down to the base of our heels, it curves outward, okay? And those arches grip inward, internal rotation. And there you go. So again, our shoelacing technique, the one that we use, it's not ours, but in the Image Clothing Company, you look up us and you find the shoelacing technique that we use. We have since the founding. We always will. It just is the only way to tie a rope in a shoe to allow it to be shaped the way the human foot is if it weren't ever altered. That's all that it is. Nothing will it do to your feet. Yes. So, but socks, when we put socks on, it's important to pull them up and kind of follow that natural outward curvature. So like if you're pulling a sock up toward you and you're looking down at the front of your leg as you're doing it, pull it up and twist it out, just ever so slight, right? I mean, you have that slight outward bend in those bones, and picture those going all the way down through the ankle. Just very slightly curve the socks as they come up to match that curvature of the leg. Otherwise, your muscles that are going to activate only in the locations that they do, because muscles only can pull from insertion to insertion. You have the calf, and it's inserting down like by your foot, right on your heel, or it wraps under the foot or whatever it does, right? You've got your Achilles, a tendon that it attaches to, and then it comes up and attaches into the knee joint. At each end, there's what's called an insertion. Muscles have to have two ends that they're anchored to be able to get shorter and pull those ends together. And so they can only do that in a straight line from one insertion to the other. And that straight line, in the case of the lower leg, is actually going to be that slight outward bow, just because that's the way that the structural system of the skeletal system of the body, that the bones are actually shaped, right? So if you have a sock that's against your muscles and going in any angle or direction or twist that is not the natural curvature of your leg, those muscles are just going to be trying to combat that, and they cannot. And so you're going to get stiff and sore. The only time there's ever pain in the body is the body's telling you there's something wrong. So, okay, that's huge. Now, I couldn't ever say it too much, another one of those things, but tags within the tongues of shoes. What I do a lot of times, because sometimes they're pretty well heat shrunk on there, and they're hard to kind of peel off. And so what I've done with these specific boots that you were allowed to see here, if you can see this in image form and visual, right? And if you're watching this episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast as well as listening, then you saw these boots. What I've done to these is actually take a really sharp knife and put a lot of vertical slits and horizontal slits into those tags in the tongues of my shoes, because your ankles would always be activated. You will never have healthy feet if you don't have healthy ankles. You'll never have a healthy hand if you don't have a healthy shoulder or elbow or wrist, all three of those, right? Never will your feet be healthy if your hips, knees, and ankles are not. But really, it usually stems from the feet and comes up. Normally stems from the hands and goes to the shoulder. But there's a lot of things that can play from the other way as well, right? Shoulder seams will affect the hands. Tags in the rear of a collar will affect the hands. Pant waist lines or things in pockets will affect the feet, right? It can go both ways. The body only works as a whole. No opinion of mine. So, those ankles though, if you are looking down at your ankle and you just like try to activate the muscles, you can see that your ankle will kind of expand a little bit. It'll like look like it's kind of like throbbing, almost like a heartbeat. As you activate the muscle and release it, the activation will get the muscles to work. All those tendons that are going down into the feet and all the muscles and everything, they'll just do what they do. And they can't activate against something slippery with those tags there. And so collapsed arches, shin splints, altered body, hamstrings tight as can be, overactive quads, pelvis in an anterior position, low back pain, upper traps deactivated because all those things traveling up will just change the curvature of your spine. Every one of those things plus many, many more come from just a tag in the tongue of the shoe. No opinion of mine. It's just the truth. It happens, period, and done. You can lace your shoes correct and tie them correct, and you have a tag in there. Your muscles just cannot activate against something slippery. It just doesn't work. There's nothing slippery like that the body would be forced to being pressed against in nature. And these are entirely man-made materials, at least the tags around this time, modern day, 2025. There's slippery, synthetic, and there you go. You have dorsiflexion within your ankles, which is when your toes are coming upward. You also have plantar flexion, but that's really pointing your toes away from you, and so that's, in a sense, lifting that tag off of the top of your foot. It's still there, and, I mean, depending, right? Boots, mine, like right now I'm looking at it, when I'm fully pointing my toes away from me, plantar flexing, it actually pulls that tag almost all the way off of the top of my ankle. But dorsiflexing, lifting your ankles, it's just pressing that tag into muscles that want to activate, and they cannot against that. So you will then have shin splints, period, and done. And you can do all the rehab you want and then go back out and run with tags. Shin splints again, rehab all you want, tags are still there. You're doing pointless recovery after you've done an activity that the body doesn't even like. I mean, we'll get into that. I don't want to run out of space. I mean, if it happens, it happens. I'm not in charge of that at this point, but this is so beautiful. It's just truth. It will always be what it is. So, yes, shin splints are a myth. It's like arch support is a myth. Overactive upper traps are a myth. Anterior pelvic tilt for reasons that you can't seem to get to the bottom of. It's a myth as far as something that people think is like a genetic thing. It's your clothing, period, and done. No opinion to anybody. No opinion anyone could have. You have a mechanical machine, you place something onto it in a position it does not work in, and you've altered it, and now it has pain. Done. So, yes, golly. It's like a lot of it's unworthiness is what I'm feeling. How could I possibly be somebody who can have this truth that I can share to every human that could ever come in contact with this episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, episode 59, titled Running? I mean, it's crazy. That's really a big part of my, like, the emotion that you can sense, if you can, coming through this, is I feel so unworthy to know this. Because I'm looking around at people and they're living in this, like, made-up society where they think that shin splints are a thing, but then they have these things going on. And it's like, no, you don't have quote-unquote shin splints. You don't have an anterior pelvic tilt. You don't have whatever they want to label as anything within the body. If it is coming from clothing, and it is, there's no dispute to the stuff that just you can see once you know what it is. You don't got to believe me. Please don't believe me. It's just the truth. So, anyway, shin splints. Well, okay, so shin splints I'm going to talk about for just a second. That's one of the most common running injuries, definitely. Tags, we just went over that. Shoe lacing techniques. Again, the arches of the feet will just be like this. Very similar to how the hands operate. They grip inward and come up like that. The inner part of your feet are taller than the outer part of your feet, right? Your big toes are taller than your pinky toes, and those bones just travel up to the ankle. So the toes, the feet, if you put your feet like together, they're going to like almost make a pyramid, right? And come up to the center. And our shoelacing technique just shapes the shoe like the foot. I said it and I could say it a zillion times and never say it too many. It's just going to save lives, literally. So not just change them, save them. That's not some kind of overly exaggerated, bold claim. I mean, this is just the truth. So any shoelacing technique that's just not allowing that foot to be naturally shaped as it is just not allowing it to. And these feet that we have support our entire body. If you can stand, then your whole, well, if you're going to be running, you're going to be able to stand. Your entire body's weight, and I mean, you could be like 25 pounds, but just every part of you that is you is being supported by the lowest part of you on an earth with gravity, which is your feet. So if they're altered by a shoelacing technique, which is any and every shoelacing technique that is not the one that we use. It's not about us, but it's just, that's how the foot is shaped. I didn't decide it. It's not me. I mean, I can't have an opinion on this. Your feet are going to be altered. And so now that dorsiflexion we were talking about, lifting those toes, which is what running is, right? You take a step forward, you lift your toe, and it reaches forward and it comes to the ground. And then you lift the lift the toes on the other foot, and it comes forward and it comes to the ground, and they just switch, right? Strides, running strides. There we go. Dorsiflexion, dorsiflexion, dorsiflexion. So every single time you dorsiflex, or again, just your feet being feet in general and just being naturally activated, they won't, if any of that is altered. And then now that we're in this deep, if this is even your first episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, or first thing of us at all, then I think it's very obvious at this point. And if not, that's okay. But tying your shoes unevenly, you're taking your rope and you're just, try it for yourself. Take your shoe, take it off, hold it in the air, tie, have like both a lace in both hands if you're just going to tie your shoe. Put the right hand over the left and pull it, and you'll watch the shoe twist, and then undo it and take your left hand and put it over the right and watch the shoe twist, and it'll go the other way. It's that obvious when we can see it. We have no opinions we push here at In the Image Clothing Company. We speak truth, period, and done. Again, we mess up. I mess up, and I will always, but it's just the truth, because I can't tell you something if you can do it yourself. So that's just as obvious as it is once you can see it. So we have to tie our shoes evenly over toward the inside, as I said. That's just a rotation thing. And when I say just, I mean, it's just as obvious as it is once we can see it. Don't feel bad if you haven't. I was 24 years old before I knew any of this. Well, most all of it. I mean, I didn't even know, even though it's so obvious. So, okay, there we go. Now, when we're running, this is the big thing about running. A little bit of context before you think that I'm just some like person who never wants to do any kind of physical exertion. I used to do flips. I would do parkour. I could do gainers on the ground, right? Like a one-footed swing backflip. Even up until last year, I was doing those. I can do, or could do, probably still could, but I just haven't for a while. One-footed front flips, we call them Websters. I can do two-footed, like, punch front flips. Keep in mind, I mean outside, like on the grass, right? Not on, like, a trampoline. So I understand what impact means is where I'm going with this. I can do a lot of flips, side flips and back flips. Um, yeah, those are flips, all flips that I've done. On trampolines, I could do corkscrews, and I could do back folds, front folds, front 180s. Like, I mean, I could do quite a few flips, and I did so many for years outside into, like, whatever it was. I mean, I would do it on the mountainside off a rock, or I would do it off a little concrete ledge onto the grass, or a lot on the grass, or off like something into little like wood chips or mulch or whatever. So I want to make it very clear, I'm not just like some person who never has had any like physical exertion, and I'm sitting here saying you're damaging your body because you like stepped off a curb. No, I know impact within the body, but there's nothing like just repetitive impact when it comes to damaging the human body. I mean, that's what's going to damage your human body. You don't want to just impact. Running, and this is maybe debatable, but I'm going to say running, I don't want to say it like that because I don't want to have an opinion about this. I'm going to say this as it is. I'm not going to try to approach it in any way to make a point. Just think about running. I'll say what I was going to do, so it's not like I'm trying to like avoid something. I was going to say running is so much more impact than doing a flip, and it is, but I don't want to just say that's cut and dry because the level of impact of coming off like multiple feet from off of the ground and hitting the ground, it's like a harder impact, but then you can really cushion and absorb yourself as you bend your knees and bend your entire body. And, you land on the balls of your feet and cushion there, then your knees, then your hips, then your back, and then like your arms even can do cushioning even if they don't touch the ground, but then you can cushion that way. So, I mean, it's a different kind of impact. But this repetitive impact, even if you're running and only touching the balls of your feet and your heels never touch the ground, let's say, because some people do that, which is how the body naturally would just operate, truly, which is crazy in itself. I mean, we can get so deep, like I said, but no matter what, it's impact. You have the lightest running stride on the earth, let's say. You're still having impact. I mean, you're still off the ground entirely, and then you hit the ground. That's really what like separates running from walking is there's a moment where both of your feet are off the ground entirely between each stride, or else it's a walk, right? It's like speed walking, basically. I mean, so that's what running is impact. That's pretty much what defines running, is that you're impacting the ground. And then you're off of it, and then you impact it, and then you're off of it, and then you impact it, and thousands and thousands and thousands of times. And, okay, between each joint of the body, there's just cartilage, okay? There's cushion between the joints, and it's there to do that, to cushion, but it's not there to have the intention of pushing it miles and miles and miles, kilometers and kilometers and kilometers. Impact. That is not how the body's designed to be used. I don't care what anybody says, and you don't have to care what I care about or not, but just the truth. It's such a myth. People nowadays will say, the human body is designed to run, and you can run miles and miles and miles and miles and kilometers and kilometers and kilometers and kilometers, and the body will just keep running. No. False. Entirely false. Don't believe me, and I don't have to be, like, right, but it's just the truth. It's false. Well over half of runners get a decently major injury every year that they do run. You've got people who are out there just doing, like, heavy lifting, manual labor, intense physical jobs year after year after year, and pretty much not getting injured. I mean, if they're intentional and they're using their body the way it's designed, but I just mean, again, the difference between using the body to operate and to bend and hinge and move and go through its full ranges of motion and lift things and stay activated and use all of it. That's how the body's designed to work. And the body is designed to work, as in it's designed to stay mobile, to do operation. And that's, again, we have that episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast I mentioned, titled Designed to Work. And I discussed that quite a bit. But you're not doing like basically any range of motion when you're running. So you're just in an entirely little, very, very shallow range of motion within your legs, and you're just impacting. Again, if you have the lightest straight on the earth, you're still impacting every single time your feet hit the ground and come off. And the range of motion that's happening within your ankle joint, all of the workings of your feet first, we'll start there because that's the base. The ankle joint, the knee, the hips, the range of motion within those things is very, very, very small. I mean, you think about standing completely vertically versus sitting in a deep low squat, which is very natural with both of your heels entirely flat on the ground, feet facing basically forward and all the way down, right? I mean, that's how the body should work. That's its entire full range of motion. And that's what the body's given. That's what it's designed to use. When you're running, you're barely into any range of motion in all of those joints that I just discussed. And then, like I was saying, there's cartilage within every joint. Between two bones, that's a joint, right? A bone connects to another one. There you go. It has an operation. Between there, it has what's called cartilage, which is just like a kind of a squishy but pretty stiff at the same time material that just allows for some cushion between those joints so you don't have two bones hitting together. Like picture your teeth hitting together versus having like a rubber mouth guard, okay? That's kind of what cartilage would do in between two bones. It's actually pretty much, a good way to see it if you don't quite know what cartilage is, or even if you do. I mean, that's just basically what it is. Basically, right? Take it with a grain of salt. But so within every joint, that cartilage is a cushion, but it's meant to cushion the body with the level of impact and the ways of impact and within full ranges of motion, so the body's being worked proper and well and thoroughly. Just the way that the body would actually naturally only always just do the thing that it does, okay? But then you're just doing these very short ranges of motion, a lot of impact, potentially so much stuff going on, socks twisted, shoelaces stretchy, maybe, and then also laced incorrectly, shoes tied unevenly, your whole body's twisted, heels on your shoes potentially, your soles of your shoes might be like marshmallowy material when the body would just be standing on very firm earth naturally. The earth is firm. Dirt is firm, even though it can be soft in ways. It's firm. Rocks are obviously, if you don't know, rocks are very firm. I mean, what else are we going to be walking on as human beings? Even sand is much firmer than any kind of shoe squish material that is squishy, right? I mean, that has the intention to be like cushioned. Well, you're just deactivating your muscles. With squishy shoe soles, it's like having a slippery synthetic tag against a muscle. It's deactivating it. It cannot activate against something that moves. I mean, like you can stand on a rock and you can know that it's very firm and your body can be very stable, but you step onto like a squishy mat in bare feet and you have no stable support, like an air mattress, for example. I mean, that's like where you're getting to, closer to an air mattress than a rock when you have a running shoe versus a barefoot shoe that is very thin and firm. We want the body to work the only way that it does. And again, I'm not condemning, I'm not saying like, hey, you should know, because I didn't, but really, we all should know because we've been given this thing and it only does what it does. And it's crazy that we're this out of touch. Again, universal truths, undisputed truths, no opinion of mine. This is just how it is. So, yes, no give, right? No give in clothing anywhere. We have an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled No Give. And I went into multiple things, but within clothing, yes, shoelaces should be very firm. Shoe material should be very firm. Shoe soles should be very firm. But also accommodating for the shape of the feet, right? Not just like a firm, tight little box. Ideally shaped just as close to the foot as we can get without excess room in there, because then you're trying to just keep your shoes on, even if they're tied tightly around your ankle and things. If there's any space within your feet, within your shoes at all, your feet will be trying to just use muscles and things to keep the shoe on, even if it won't actually fall off. If there's any play in there, that's another thing our shoelacing technique does so well, is top to bottom. It's shaped like the foot to where there's no play, to where if you're lifting your toe, sorry for making sound as I spoke with my hands. When you're lifting your feet up, dorsiflexing your feet, right? Lifting your toes. If you wear something like shoes that have, like slip-in shoes that don't have laces that we can lace correctly within the Image Clothing Company shoelacing technique to just cinch it to the foot so there's no play in there, then just the play within between the top of your foot and the inside of the top of the shoe, that will cause shin splints. Because before you can actually lift your foot off the ground, you have to lift your foot to hit the top of the inside of your shoe. And that gap there, well, it's just all the muscles that are going down, like what we would call shin splints, right? Those muscles, that's why. In those cases, you're getting shin splints. Again, as obvious as it is once we see it. So, okay, I can get into whatever I can get into and whatever. That's pretty well thorough, decently. Again, I could get so deep, seriously. And we talk about very, very minute little things. Oh, one thing I have to say before I move on, the dreaded collar seam within t-shirts. Okay, this seam here will cause that side, wherever it's on, to be higher than the other side. Okay, so a big reason as to why it's always on the left side, when I say always, I didn't mean every single time. Almost always, that dreaded collar seam will be on the left side of t-shirts. And the reason as to why is because tying a right-handed knot in shoes unevenly toward the right, as if you're tying the right shoe to go into external rotation, traveling up the entire rest of your body, taking away all the whole right side of the body in that case is internal rotation. It's just being stolen because the knot is physically pulling the foot into external rotation, traveling up the whole side of the body. And we talk about that. That's why it's one of our 2 prerequisites, shoelacing and tying, right? Correctly within the Image Clothing Company shoelacing technique, not our opinion, just the shape of the foot. That right side of the body being in external rotation because of the shoelace will then cause the right shoulder to be lower because external rotation at the shoulder capsule, which will just happen because it travels up the whole chain of the body, is a lower position. Internal rotation is like activating that trap because it pulls the body closer to its center line, right? It pulls from the end of the shoulder out here up to it connects to the edge of the cervical spine, which is this part of your spine that's your neck, and it inserts into the base of the rear of your skull right off to your spine. That's your upper trap, and that will pull your shoulder not only up, but also closer to your center line, and there's your internal rotation. So external rotation from the shoelace in the case of tying a right-handed knot on the right foot, because a right-handed knot on the left foot is to the center, but then a left-handed knot on the right foot would be toward the center. That's over toward the inside. Okay, golly, I could get so deep, and I just don't want to rush, but I also don't want to overly explain things. But I don't think that's a problem in these cases to overly explain this at all. I don't think so. This will live on forever. It's eternal truths, and this is in the Image Clothing Company podcast, right? So, documentation. But yes, external rotation on the right-hand side of the body, let's say, will place the right side of the body lower. So what they do is place the dreaded collar seam on the left side of the body because that will naturally because there's excess material and all the things that dreaded collar seam does do to the body, it places that side where it is located higher. And so that's the position you're already in if you're tying your shoes unevenly. So one of the main things that, well, I haven't mentioned it yet, but in this episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, our dreaded collar seam modification is something that I coined the term of dreaded collar seam. We have so many ways of seeing how to do that within In the Image Clothing Company. Find us online, right? One of the main things it does is cause that dreaded collar seam to be able to drop lower, getting it ideally as even as we can, with the other side being the right in almost every case, just because it's almost always placed on the left side of t-shirts. So that's one of the things we talk about so often. I've said in the past, if I were to go a third as far as prerequisites for In the Image Clothing Company when it comes to shoelacing technique plus tying, and then secondly, we say to remove all tags, not that we say, but just because we have to, because of what they do. I've said before, if I were to go a third as far as things in clothing to do, dreaded collar seam modification. It's that huge. So that dreaded collar seam will just cause you to be imbalanced, period. if it's placed onto you, as far as an item of clothing that has that, which is very common in modern 2025 and past decades. So then you go on a run with that, and your whole spine is actually twisting, right? One of your shoulders goes higher than the other. Your shoulders can only be shoulders if they're connected to something, and they're connected to your spine. And so now your spine is curved, your spine goes to your hips are now curved, your hips go from there down to the ends of your toes, and so your feet are now changed. And if your feet get any kind of rotation difference, your arches collapse, because arches grip inward, and they have to oppose each other to evenly grip to support the body, because there is a center, and they are on each side of that center. So anytime there is a rotation change within the human body at all, again, if you can't do something about it because you've got a physical thing within your own body, something that's actually very, very like real, right? Amputation, deformity, something, surgery, then okay. And you can't do more than you can do, and we do all that we can do in every case, but we're not in charge. We have things that we can't overcome as human beings. We really do. We have to rely on God. Truthfully, that is just what it is. So we're conditional beings as human beings. So, but anything and everything we can do to address any twist, we have to, because the body can't stay centered if there's a twist. And again, the arches have to oppose each other in the feet. I actually made a video for the main site of In the Image Clothing Company one time last fall titled "A Life Without Arches." And I went into that, how they have to be opposing. Opposition in all things, as we talk about within the gospel of Jesus Christ. One can't grip if there's nothing pulling like against it. So like when we stand, gosh, I'm not going to get off topic, but we'll talk about things as we do, as time goes on. So just, again, the only way the body works, not my opinion, not me giving some like, you should try this. No, just let me tell you how your body works, because it'd be great to know. And don't believe me, but it's the truth. So, yes, where was I with rotations, shoes, shin splints, the dreaded collar seam? The dreaded collar seam will cause shin splints, right? You're rotating your spine, and now everything's just in a twist, and you're trying to evenly dorsiflex your feet as you move forward in life, or just lift your legs off the ground. You have to dorsiflex your toes to lift your leg. Well, if you're going to really actually use your body the way that it's mechanically going to work. And so if your spine's twisted because one of your shoulders is higher because there's a dreaded collar seam, then one of your feet will be out of its neutral forward facing, really slightly inward, because the arches grip inward. But one of your feet will be out of that position. It will be your right if it's on the left side, the dreaded collar seam. It will be your left foot if the dreaded collar seam is on the right side, just because that's how the body's going to twist. It has to compensate. It has a center line. It has gravity pulling on it always. It's just how it works. So don't believe me. It's just the truth. I could keep saying that, right? So your right side would be able to have the opportunity, if you will, to have shin splints, even if you were running entirely barefooted, if you had a collar seam on your upper left shoulder, because that right foot would be in external rotation, just following from the dreaded collar seam down, even though gravity comes, normally from the base up gets altered because of gravity, but the body also gets altered very much so from the top down, because it's just all connected. So the dreaded collar seam on the upper left shoulder will give you the potential to have a shin splint on your right shin, because that side will be in external rotation from the left shoulder, elevating, spine twisting, going down, pelvis twisting, legs twisting from the femurs down to the lower legs, through the ankles, neutral ankle is gone, and arch is now not gripping. Dorsiflexion is now not happening in its normal neutral position. The toes will be facing outward, and there you go. Okay, anytime you see anybody running and their feet are not pointed straight, their entire body is being damaged. Period, and done. If there was no clothing on the human body, out of modesty, but just the way that it works, the feet would always point straight. Exceptions if you're like doing things, right? But if you're walking, straight. If you're standing, straight. That's just how the body's going to work. No opinion of mine. That's just the truth. So, yes, right, arches grip inward. So when I say straight, it could look slightly in, or even quite a bit in, but again, toward the center of the body. The feet point out, you're going away from yourself. It's like you're just falling away into nothing. Oh, and it feels terrible. I've experienced it. I've experienced it to such a crazy degree when I was trying to figure out how shoes needed to be laced and tied just to allow the feet to be unaltered. I was doing them in such incorrect ways at certain times to try to figure out what to do and to get my own body centered. And I was in such physical pain and just immense fear and it's scary. I mean, your body's being pulled out and away from its only self. And it's crazy scary, actually. So you have to have your feet pointed straight and maybe again slightly in, just to the center, to the spine. Just picture the spine and let's get to it without trying to squeeze our own arms against our bodies or like hitting our knees together, but just naturally in line, straight. The body goes straight if it's going straight. The feet point straight if they're going straight. The thumbs point forward if the arms are down to the sides. There's a straight to going straight. Again, I'm not condemning, I'm not making fun. It has to be hit that hard. It's just that real. So, again, myself, I was in a very, very poor state of being out of the only way the body works for many, many years. A lot of it was just so bad. I feel for people. I know how it is. Eternal truths. What I'm saying within this episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, episode 59, titled Running, will never change. This is just the truth. So, gosh, dude, live on forever. This is one of those immensely populated, I kind of wanted to say it's silly. This is going to be a video that is, going to get referenced so much. Or just an audio clip. It's a podcast episode, right? But forever, when it comes to In the Image Clothing Company, this is going to be, hey, you don't quite know what we're talking about when we say these things, or you want to believe that running is actually natural for the human body, check out episode 59 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Running. No opinion of Evan Strong being the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. No opinion of In the Image Clothing Company. No determined by time. No determined by what you want to do or what you believe or what your opinion is. The human body only works the way that it does. Here you go. Let's refer you to this and don't argue with us. I don't want to hear it. But if you want to hear truth, not my words, you don't got to care about my words again because of me by any means. But if you want to know truth, if you want to get your body out of pain, listen to this and don't just blindly believe it, but it is the truth. So, I mean, I've been saying since the founding of In the Image Clothing Company that I know the human body in depth. And I don't mean it to be like some kind of like show-off way, like I know so much about the human body, but I just know what it actually means and takes to get the body to work the only way that our living God designed it. We cannot decide how it works. And so that's why I'm so bold about I really do know what I'm talking about. It's not about me, but I do know what I'm talking about. People are in so much physical pain, and what we say here will fix it. I mean, there's things that go into people's own individual situations, but yes, truth. So, okay, that's a lot of that. I mean, I could get so into depth, but just go check out the main site of In the Image Clothing Company if you want to know how clothing would fit the body naturally, and there we go. But here's a big thing. Let's look at running as it is. In the past, people didn't run, okay? I mean, you can get all saying what you want to try to, pin me on my point. It's not my point. I'm not trying to make a point. I'm not trying to be right. Because, yes, hunter-gatherers, yes, you're chasing an animal with a spear, and you have to run after it, to spear it, to eat it, to stay alive. Sure, the human body can run, but it's not supposed to just run for hours at a time. For 3 minutes maybe, if you have to go that long to catch the animal. But the body's just designed to work. So what really happened is, within the past decades, and I don't want to get so nitpicky on dates, but truly, the past decades, within much less than a century from this point back, much less, running became popular because people started to have jobs where they were sitting at a desk. There was no such thing as a computer job until we had computers invented. Computers as well. It's only been a few decades since they've even been a thing. A few meaning, right, I mean, much less than 100 years from this point back. So, yes, there'd be no reason in the past that a human being would be sitting down at a quote-unquote white-collar job. Not every and all white-collar jobs are unnatural or wrong to do or whatever. I'm not trying to make any kind of blanket statement, but I am saying the truth. These things didn't even exist. People did not sit down in the past, okay? They'd sit down to rest, sure, but on something that was more natural, and they were in touch with their body to such a higher degree than we are nowadays. People were not holding technological devices in their hand. In the past, they did not exist. So the body was just working in the past, as in physically it operated. I don't mean that people were just always doing work as far as like trying to get income or trying to just do things that had to be done that way, but it was just always operating. It was always doing what it had to do to work because people had to do things. But nowadays we live in a world where things can come to our doorsteps, and we have things that will allow us to be like believing we're doing something when we're just sitting stationary staring into a piece of glass. It's just an illusion, no opinion of mine. It's just the truth. I mean, those things to a degree are actually doing things, yes, but still, it's not even really actually real. No opinion of mine. Now, here's the thing. Because of this whole boom in jobs changing, people were like, okay, well, now that our bodies are taking such a beating because we're sitting at a desk all day doing whatever, right? Even if it wasn't before, or even if it was before computers were even invented, still just like these office jobs where people are sitting there doing whatever paperwork, that wasn't something that happened in the past. I mean, you had like people that were bankers, and you had certain things, lawyers, right? But then we got into where there was a lot of paperwork happening, getting closer to where we are nowadays, right? And then, it just has become more and more and more unnatural. So human beings have been sitting stationary and doing things that they just had never done in the past. And because of that, there was this boom about 40 years ago, maybe, give or take, maybe a little bit more, 40 to 60 years ago, maybe. I mean, take that with a grain of salt. Again, I'm not so caught up on the dates exactly. I don't care, actually. In fact, I do not. But within the past 100 years, definitely, except much less time than that, I'm certain, even though I didn't live then. People just thought that, okay, well, let's start to move our bodies because we're all of a sudden not. And it's something that could never have happened in the past. There'd be no thing you could be doing sitting stationary. Besides just nothing, or like knitting, but even then, like, you know what I mean, sewing, and like it's just so silly. We're just so out of touch. Again, no condemnation to another human being, but I was as well, and in many ways I still am, and it just will have to be to degrees because I live in this modern man-made society, and we just do, and it will continually get more what it is. It's been prophesied within scripture. We look around and see it. There is no opinion to it. So yes, in the past, people's bodies worked. Then all of a sudden they just weren't working because of lifestyle changes, things around us that we personally as individuals didn't quite choose, but just society has changed. So then people started to run to try to get their body to have some like blood flow and motion and range of motion and mobility. So people would start to run because that's something that you can just do without having to be like so coordinated to play like a sport, or like have to have a like, you know, the equipment to play a sport or whatever, to try to like, again, just an idea of what it means to get the body to work, which it just should always be activated as a whole. That's the only way it actually works, the only way that actually ever will or has worked. We don't get to decide. And that's the thing, is when people are running, they're doing it in states of half working bodies because of the clothing that they are wearing. So it's just so weird. Anyway, the point is there's no opinion to it. Running is just a thing that has become something that people do. But as I've said many times, and since the very founding of In the Image Clothing Company, you are only training the motion of running while you are running. I described, and I'm glad that I did when I did, because I haven't really quite fully laid it out like that yet within In the Image Clothing Company content. But the extreme slightness of range of motion that your body is actually having when you're running, it's so very little. Your arms are just barely kind of moving to just compensate for what your legs are doing, and your legs are just barely moving, really, when we look at like the hip joint and how much motion is actually there, and the bend in the knees, right? We're never getting into any kind of actual full range of motion if we are running as a human being. It's just so silly. And so with that being said, you are only training running. Your running will not carry over into any kind of daily activity. It will not carry over into climbing stairs. It will not carry over into, I don't even need to say any more than anything. I didn't even need to say the stair example. You are only training running when you are running. You're not training your body as a whole to operate well. You're actually damaging it. No opinion of mine, because you're getting it used to only using a very, very, very small range of motion, and it's really only using part of it. I mean, your upper body's not really doing much of anything when you run besides impact every disc of your spine and all the cartilage between each of those discs. Impact, impact, impact. Even if you have the lightest stride of running as out of any human to be on the planet. Every joint